You are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. What happens when a liberal organizational psychologist who did her doctoral dissertation on workplace bullying starts seeing bullying in her own social circles? And what happens when, after 6 months of soul searching, she realizes that the Democrat Party she thought she knew turns out to be disingenuous, saying one thing but doing another? If your name is Dr. Karlyn Borysenko, you walk away from the Democrat Party. How has she been treated since walking away? What are her thoughts on solving political divide in our country? And why does she think it's so important to stand up for principles? We'll explore these questions and more in our interview with Dr. Borysenko on today's New Book of Daniel podcast. Hello and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobinski. I'll be your host on this adventure. Today on our show, we've got a special guest. I really like her a lot. She's intellectually honest. She's sharp. And you know what? She's not exactly a Democrat anymore. You probably know her as the woman who changed her mind about conservatives after she attended a Trump rally in New Hampshire and then walked away from the Democrat Party. Dr. Karlyn Borysenko is an organizational psychologist. She's an executive performance coach, a mindfulness expert. She helps people find greater happiness in their personal and professional lives. She also works with organizations to create amazing environments for their teams and help drive productivity. She's got a master's degree in business administration, a PhD in psychology. She's a trainer, a facilitator, an author, and an award-winning speaker. I ran into Karlyn at CPAC last month, and we had a great conversation. Turns out that her and I have a lot of crossover in the type of work that we do, and I asked her to come on the show and just talk about some of the things that have been happening in her life, and she agreed. And in our discussion, we end up talking about politics some. We end up talking a little bit about higher education. The conversation is really just kind of a stream of consciousness. We just let the conversation flow. So you got a kind of a seat to sit next and listen to us talk. I should let you know that our show is sponsored by the Lift Realty Group. Ty Daniels is the owner of Lift Realty Group. He listens to the show. He shares a lot of the same values that I talk about. So if you are thinking of moving to Northern Idaho, I got to tell you personally, I think we could use the reinforcements. We've got people escaping what I call Western Libtardia. The three provinces of Western Libtardia are Washington, Oregon, and California. They've been coming to Idaho, bringing their thought processes with them, their values. We'd like to get more conservatives in the state. If you're looking at moving to Idaho, it's beautiful up in Northern Idaho. Got Coeur d'Alene, Sandpoint. Ty is your guy. Call him at 208-640-6333. I'm down here in Boise. Northern Idaho is a whole lot prettier. And by the way, we're also the least regulated state in the nation. The government really stays out of your business here. So if you're looking at moving, or if you just like a nice vacation home, call Ty at 208-640-6333 or visit the Lift Media Group. The liftrealitygroup.com. All right. I also need to tell you that unfortunately during our recording with Dr. Borysenko, that my neighbor had some lawn people come over. I will record this podcast out of my home office. And about 24 feet that way, during our recording, my neighbor's got these guys out there with the lawnmowers and the leaf blowers and all that stuff. So we had to stop the recording a little bit here and there to let that happen. So also the video gets a little wonky. Somewhere in the electronosphere, the video kind of got a little wonky. Audio is fine. If you are listening to this, just listening, you're not going to notice a thing. But if you're watching it on YouTube, there's a couple of places during our conversation where the video freezes up. Don't worry, it doesn't last long. It is a little bit weird, but the audio on it is perfectly fine. So I hope you'll sit back, listen to this conversation that we kind of meander through. And as they say, without further ado, let's go to my conversation with Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. All right, we are here today with Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. Kind of a, I don't want to say explosion onto the scene of politics. In fact, her Twitter says that she's an accidental political commentator, but there's so much more to her. And we're going to get a little bit beyond the political commentators. Dr. Karlyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. Excited to be here.
This is a real honor to have you because, well, okay, people need to know a little bit about how I came across you because I stumbled upon your column. For those who don't know, um, Karlyn was a Democrat for 20 years, voted Democrat for 20 years. She wrote a piece after she had some experience. I'm going to have her tell us a little bit about her background, but I contacted her via Facebook, and I kind of suspected that she wouldn't get back to me because, well, when something like that happens, you get inundated. I'm sure you got inundated.
Oh, I got absolutely inundated. There are still messages that I've received that I have not seen yet.
Yeah. So I didn't think you're going to get back to me, but through happenstance and our common friend now of Tracy Beans at UncoverDC.com, and then you and I running into each other at CPAC.
Literally running into each other.
Yes, we made a good connection here. So I thank you for coming on the show. That we're glad to have you. Let's talk a little bit about, just briefly, because your story's out there, and I know you got a live show. We're going to talk about that too. But for our listeners that may have not read about your background, give us a 90-second background of what happened and why are you here?
Okay, so I was a Democrat for 20 years since I was 18 years old and never really saw myself leaving the Democratic Party. But then, I started to see a lot of things going on with the social justice community and how they've kind of taken over the ideology of the Democratic Party and pushed them very, very far to the left. And as someone who's always been a centrist, this made me really uncomfortable. And I started opening up and listening to more conservative voices to really kind of reevaluate where I stood on things. And all of that ended up culminating with me going to Trump's rally when he was in Manchester, New Hampshire, and having just a great time and realizing that the perception I had of Trump voters was completely wrong on a whole number of levels. And I came back to my house, and the next day I spent about 20 minutes writing an article that I never thought anyone would read, and threw it up on Medium, which is a site I didn't really use for anything. And lo and behold, it got about 3 million views in a little over a week. So to say explosion would be an understatement in how it impacted my life for a little while.
And it's continuing to impact your life, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, people are still reading it. People are still talking about it. I've done all sorts of interviews about it. And yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because in some ways it hasn't changed my life at all. And in some ways it's changed my life very, very drastically.
Well, do you mind me asking how drastically and where, in what arenas?
Yeah. So I never anticipated becoming known for anything political. I've always tried to, I've always talked about politics online, and I've always snarkily tweeted during the debates just because I can't imagine sitting through an entire debate without snarkily tweeting. But I never thought that would be a thing for me. It's funny, I actually, like, back in the day when I was a young professional, and this is when MySpace was the thing. This was before Facebook was even open to the public. MySpace actually had a really powerful blogging platform. And so I would blog about politics on MySpace. I would get about 25,000 views a day on my blogs on there. Yeah, wow. I mean, it was like real. And so, but that was kind of, so I had a great time doing that. But then when MySpace went away, all of that went away with it. And I thought, okay, I had my fun, time to move on and be an adult and whatever. And so, kind of all of a sudden becoming known for this article that I never anticipated being known for, it impacted my life in a few ways. First of all, it impacted my life in that it showed me that people were open to hearing what I had to say on these topics, and they wanted to hear what I had to say, which I just never thought was. I would sit on my couch and say, like, it's funny, like a couple of months ago, I remember specifically, I was sitting on my couch talking to my husband, and I was like, Victor, why aren't I one of those people ranting about politics and culture on YouTube? I would be great at that. And he was like, well, you should go do it. I was like, nah. And so I never thought it would be a thing. So that's changed. I mean, it's also changed my business in that, I lost clients over this article. I
imagine you did.
Lost clients. Yeah. But I've also started gaining clients where they're kind of undercover about it. They call me about something else, but then they're like, oh, by the way, I like your politics stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to get along. So yeah, that's a little bit about how it's impacted me.
So when you have people asking you this question, by the way, or saying, oh, by the way, I like your politics.
Yeah.
How do you think that affects your relationship with them professionally?
Well, I think that they see someone that like thinks like them, right? And I think we're always more comfortable when we're around people who we have some of those agreements with, or that we just feel more comfortable with. And the ironic part is that I've actually talked very little about my personal values in this whole thing, and I've actually never even said I'm going to vote for Trump. Now I feel like the Democratic Party is pushing me towards voting for Trump, kicking and screaming. But I've actually never said who I'm going to vote for, and I've talked very little about my views on things. But I think that I said this in my piece too. I think one of the reasons that people like Trump is they feel like he's someone that's in their corner. He's someone that's going to have their back. And I think it's kind of the same thing when someone says, I like your politics. What they're really kind of communicating is that Trump supporters for the last several years have been called horrible names by people they don't know all the time. They've lost friends, they've lost family members, and then all of a sudden they see someone that's like, I'm going to approach you with an open mind. And by the way, I don't think you're a terrible person because of who you chose to vote for. And they're like, oh my God, a reasonable person that I can have a conversation with, even if we don't agree on everything.
And that right there, what you just said is the key, is can we have a reasonable conversation about something, even if we don't agree?
Right, right. And I have found over and over, I'm actually thinking about writing another piece right now, just comprised of tweets that I've gotten from Trump supporters that say something to the effect of, we probably don't agree on a lot of things politically, but I like that you have an open mind, and I like that we can have a dialogue. And I think there's really a lot of people right now starving for that dialogue. I think that's one of the reasons my article resonated, was that, we're in a place right now as a country where we can't even talk to each other about these issues. And one of the things that I was really struggling with is I love a good discussion. I love a good debate. It's no fun to talk to people who agree with you all the time.
No.
Right. And
No.
that's something that's been missing.
Exactly. And the loss of civility, it's we, and I don't know how old you are. You appear.
I am not going to say it on a podcast. I'll tell you what. I'm approaching middle age. Let's just say that.
Okay. And I'm probably past middle age, but I was raised with, and a lot of folks were raised with, you don't discuss politics, you don't discuss religion.
Right.
And I think that that's a mistake. The fact that we never learned how to do that. Now, when we need to have that conversation, we don't know how to have that conversation.
I absolutely agree. I mean, these are things that we should start learning from the time that we're little kids, how to have this respectful dialogue and how to disagree respectfully with one another and how to really explore these issues. And frankly, like everyone's mad, like generally speaking, a lot of people are angry that like Washington is doing nothing about the issues we care about. And they've been doing nothing for years and years and years, regardless of who is in the White House. And we wonder why. Well, it's because they never learned how to have these discussions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, speaking of Washington, you and I bumped into each other literally at CPAC.
Yes.
I recognized you and said hi, and then we ended up having a great talk after one of the sessions. And I had my laptop and my camera with me, but unfortunately, the microphone wasn't very good, and I really wish we could have recorded that conversation and played it.
Yeah.
But let's kind of try to reenact that a little bit.
Yeah.
Here we are at CPAC. There's it's your first time, right?
Yep, first time.
And it was my first time. But I'm coming at it, and people that want to know my background, because a little bit different than yours. You came out of the left, the political left, into a holistic, I'll call it a holistic view of world politics. I started off and people can read my story in episode 1 of my podcast series. You can just go to YouTube and pull up episode 1 and hear my story. But I basically started off on the left, moved to the right, and then got disgusted with the right and came back to a holistic. So you and I ended up kind of in the same place, but from different angles.
Right.
And so that's part of what our conversation was about at CPAC. One of the things that I've been seeing a lot of, in fact, just on my recent podcast, my last podcast, here's this guy on MSNBC, MSDNC, that's the way to say it. He was saying that blacks can't be in the GOP because of structural racism in this country.
Oh, for crying out loud.
I know. And it reminded me of our conversation at CPAC.
Yeah.
Because here you and I are in the hallway, I've got my laptop and my camera set up and we're talking, and you're looking around and you're pointing out all these people of color of all
Mhm.
races there.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest like surprises about CPAC because I definitely had a very, kind of stereotypical view of who was going to be there in my head. I thought, these are going to be like white male, like bros that I would have hated in college, like frat boys that I would have hated in college. And no, I mean, well, there certainly is some of that. I mean, we're like, let's not front. There certainly is some of that.
Yes, there is.
But but there's also, it's an incredibly diverse audience. And how I framed it in like a piece I wrote afterwards was like, this is authentic diversity. This is not diversity for the sake of show. It's not diversity for the sake of scoring virtue points. This is people from all different walks of life, all different races. I mean, men, like probably like pretty close to 50-50 men and women, I think. I mean, maybe a little bit more male, but like pretty close. And they're coming together to talk about the things that they care about. And one of the most refreshing things to me about CPAC was that every conversation was not about race. It was like, and it's not that, and I've said that in Democratic circles, like, oh my God, it was so refreshing to be in a place where we were talking about other things and not everything was infused with this idea of race and power and all these things. And it's not that you don't care about, people from diverse backgrounds, but you want to come up with ideas that are going to help everyone of every race.
If I could say it this way, what I like about where I see conservative politics going is it's not about the surface issues, it's about the heart issues.
Yeah.
I see a lot of the, as you said, virtue signaling happening on the political left, where it's about, what do I see? Skin color or gender,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't see so much about the values. And when I go to some place like CPAC, people are talking about the values. And you
Yes.
could be a purple Martian or a purple Plutonian or whatever, you were visiting Earth. If you're welcome if you talk about shared values.
Yeah, and you look at people like Diamond and Silk, for instance. Like Diamond and Silk were rock stars at
Oh yes,
CPAC.
they
Like they're
so
followed
were.
around by security. Like everyone's trying to get a picture with them. Like
I
these,
was I was laughing because before I talked with you at CPAC, I watched Governor Scott Walker come up,
Mm-hmm.
former Wisconsin governor, and he's being interviewed at a booth down from me, and he's by himself. It's just Governor Scott Walker, former presidential candidate Scott Walker. And then here comes Diamond and Silk walking right by me, and they've got their security entourage. And I'm going, what's with this?
No, but I mean, they brought down the house with their talk at CPAC. It was hilarious. It was hilarious. It was on point, and people loved these women. And it wasn't because they were Black. It was because of what they were saying. It was because they were talking about personal empowerment. And if you want something, you go out and you get it, and you get a job, and you do your
Shared
thing,
values.
and don't expect us to pay for you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I couldn't help but think as I was watching their talk that if they were on a stage at a Democratic event, it would be because they were Black women. That would have been the primary decider for why they were on the stage, because they were Black women. And that to me is so sad, because I think it just fundamentally diminishes the content of what they have to offer. If it's not about the content, if you're not being selected for what you're bringing to the table, then does that? I can't, like, so I'm a speaker, right? So I speak at like conferences all over the place, and there's now this movement among conferences where we're seeing events that are like, we're only going to have women speakers. That's it. No more men. We're not even going to consider men for these speaking slots. And I'm like, as a speaker, I've worked very hard to become a good speaker. I don't want to be selected because I'm a woman. I want to be selected because I'm the best speaker that you could hire for that job.
I just want to say amen. Amen. That is so the heart of it. And my wife talks a lot about the differences in virtue signaling, because virtue signaling happens on both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just happen on the left. For example, I was tweeting about, I was responding to somebody's comment. It wasn't on Twitter, it was on Facebook. And it was talking about this COVID-19 virus that we're dealing with right now. And I pointed out that this is basically a political, this is the only place that the left has been able to gain any kind of traction.
Right.
to make Trump look bad. Russia hoax didn't work. Impeachment didn't work. It didn't stick with the American public. But now that people can't buy toilet paper in the store, and Chuck Schumer's up there talking about the president's quote unquote incompetence, and they finally realized, oh, we've impacted every American with the fact that they can't find toilet paper in the stores, and now we've got this crisis that people are believing. So I don't think it's serious, but they perceive it as having gained traction.
Oh, yeah, and they're going all in on it. I mean, I've been saying for probably the better part of the year now, I'm like, the Democrats are trying to create a recession. They're trying to create a recession because it is the only thing that they are going to have to run on. Now, as a small business owner, that is absolutely terrifying to me. If they create a recession, I may lose my business. And to watch the Democrats try to create this big crisis that is going to dramatically impact thousands and thousands of people, not because necessarily the coronavirus is the worst thing that could ever happen, because it's just not, but to try to use it to score political points to win an election. I mean, I will, if they create a recession out of this that impacts my business, I will never vote for a Democrat again. I really will not.
And unfortunately, you may have just been prophetic, because I think that's what they're doing.
And that's what they're trying to do. But I also think, I mean, it seems as though, it seems, and this is my perception, but it seems as though the Trump administration took their time in getting their arms wrapped around this thing. But it seems like they're starting to make some progress on it. It seems like they're starting to figure it out. And I think that, no one can blame Trump for the coronavirus. I'm sure they're going to try. But,
what was interesting was, and I want to get back to my point that I was talking about earlier about virtue signaling, but it's interesting that last month, Chuck Schumer was dissing on President Trump for being too quick to shut down transportation between here and China.
Yeah.
That he was impacting jobs negatively and being knee-jerk reactive. And then yesterday he's on there saying that he's not doing enough. And it's like, so at some point, Chuck Schumer needs to change his name to the boy who cried wolf, because that's all he ever does is find fault with anything President Trump does, no matter what he does. It's totally damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I wrote about in my newest piece for UncoverDC, which is all about kind of my realization of how I came to the conclusion that I thought Trump was going to win in 2020. And one of the primary things was you cry wolf with everything. Everything is an emergency. It is exhausting from having come from the Democratic side and even having had what I will admit was a full-fledged case of Trump derangement syndrome. It was exhausting to me, all of the manufactured crises that happened every day. Every time Trump does anything, it is the end of the world. And it's like you can only cry wolf so many times before people just stop taking you seriously.
Do you think that more people are going to go there? They're going to realize kind of what you did, that it's the left is always crying wolf.
I think people are more than they admit. Because you understand, like Democrats, when they start changing their mind about these things, they don't talk. Like I've got a big mouth, I can't help myself. But like a lot of them, they just don't talk about it, and they vote the way they want to vote when no one's looking, right? But they don't talk about it. They don't share their concerns. I mean, I think this is true generally with moderates. Like moderates that just kind of sit in the middle and they look at both sides and they're like, every single one of you is crazy. They don't they don't talk about their points of view a lot. They're just like, you're gonna all be crazy and we're gonna do what we want to do at the end of the day.
As a psychologist, what you're talking about is confirmation bias.
Yes.
And the emotional drive to feel safe in your belief system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and technology only makes confirmation bias so much easier, because so many of us, I mean, when I was in my little liberal echo chamber, I was literally surrounded by people who were only confirming what I wanted to see every single day. But even then, it was just like, I guess if I'm proof of anything, it's that you can be surrounded with all this information that confirms that Trump is the worst person in the world, and you can still start to ask questions. And I think that a lot of people are going to start having like those wake up moments of like, this doesn't sound right. If he was really guilty of all these crimes, why didn't they charge him with a crime for impeachment? If the coronavirus is really that bad, why don't I know anyone who's gotten sick? Like, I mean, I think people are going to start asking these questions.
So what you're asking people to do though is think.
Yeah.
And I've got one of my Danielisms that I teach my clients is that everybody has thoughts, but not everybody thinks.
Well, that's true.
A thought is in my definition is a one step. A leads to B. That's a thought. And thinking is A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D, leads to E, and that's thinking. And that's how I define the two. Everybody has thoughts. Not everybody thinks in terms of the ripple effects of what's going on. What you're asking people to do is think, and that's work to some people.
It is. But you know what I think? Go ahead.
I've got friends on Facebook who that's all they do is bash President Trump. Everything that comes up on the news, they criticize. And it's like what you're just saying, that they're in that echo chamber and they don't stop and take that step back and be more objective. They're in that emotional comfort zone. They feel good about their decision and they want to reinforce it.
Yeah. But you know what I think is really going to start to wake people up is Joe Biden. I think that there is no way, if people are paying attention, I mean, and I think Joe Biden is, like, we can assume at this point he's going to be the nominee on the Democratic side. He's sunsetting. He is I am 100% convinced he is declining cognitively. And I think that if you watch him for any length of time, you're going to start to see that something is seriously wrong. And the media is not talking about this, or they're saying it was a result of a stutter. I mean, I was even talking with my husband last night about this, and my husband does not pay attention at all. And he turned to me and said, "Karlyn, something's wrong with Joe Biden." I said, "Yes, Victor, thank you." It's easy to see if you're actually paying attention to what he's saying.
And I'm a one who tries to follow the maxim of I'm not going to diagnose from a distance.
Yes.
And you're the psychologist, and so you know that maxim as well.
Yes.
But still, we have eyes; we can observe.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, listen, I agree with not diagnosing from a distance as well. But I think when we're talking about things like people running for president of the United States and no one is talking about something that
should be
is
asking
happening
questions.
Literally right in front of us. Yes, we should absolutely be asking questions. And I'm not saying it from a perspective of, Joe Biden is a horrible person. I love Joe Biden. I really do. I really have such respect for that man. But I remember seeing him. I saw him speak live in person 3-4 years ago at South by Southwest. I was literally in the second row. I have a picture of me shaking his hand when he went through the crowd. He was awesome. He was talking about his work with cancer research and funding that initiative. And it was not too long after his son died, I think. And so it was a really emotional thing for him. He was amazing. He was so on point. It was so inspiring. Fast forward to, and I literally have proof of this, and this happened while I was still a Democrat and still all in with that. I went to the New Hampshire State Democratic Convention, and every single presidential candidate was there, so I got to see all of them in person. It lasted all day long, and Joe Biden, I believe, was first out of the gate. He was on at either 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, so it was still really early in the day. You can't say he's tired, and he got up there, and I even have this post on Facebook that I made saying, something was really wrong with Joe Biden in this talk. And I remember seeing it even at that point. And, I even remember him slurring his words. I've seen him in other appearances since then where he doesn't make sense. He's conflating stories together. And I'm like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but there is so many of us have watched this happen with our parents, our grandparents. I just don't think people are going to be able to deny it. And I don't think that the Democrats are going to be able to hide him as much as they want to. And, it's only going to get worse as the stress of the campaign goes on.
So my wife tells the story of a family member. She said she knew him when he was sharp, like you're talking about, on point. And then he went into dementia. And when I met my wife and we got married, he was in full-blown dementia by then. So I never knew him before that. But she said that to watch him go through that deterioration is the exact same thing she's seeing in Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So again, I don't want to diagnose from a distance, but like my wife said, she's observing.
Right. Right.
So, um, I did want to jump back, by the way, and talk about that virtue signaling. I want to
Oh,
kind
let's do it.
of tie that back in because otherwise it's going to sit in the back of my head and percolate. Because virtue signaling happens on the left when it's like you said, we have so many percentage of blacks and so many women and so many gays and whatever. When I see virtue signaling on the right, it is often holier than thou kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was talking about this coronavirus from a political perspective and how it's being used to gain traction by the political left against Donald Trump, because the only thing that's got traction. And I pointed out the fact that at the time of my writing, I don't know what the numbers are now, but there was 26 deaths in the country.
Mm-hmm.
22 of them were in the state of Washington, and 19 of those were at a single healthcare facility.
Yeah.
So where is the crisis? Where is the,
Right.
We've had 4 deaths spread out over 49 states. The rest of them are all in one state. It's basically a very virulent strain of the flu. And so I'm talking about this from a political point of view and how they're just capitalizing on it. And this guy, this Christian man, gets on there and basically tells me, I hope that God has more mercy on you than you're showing these people who have died. And I'm going, dude, when was I talking about mercy? I was talking about the political side of things.
Right.
And I just kind of tweeted back or posted back and said, sorry for your bad eyesight. But there's this virtue signaling from the right that there's 2 types of giving. A love where I'm going to put you above me. I'm going to honor you above me. And then there's this tolerance thing where I'm going to tolerate you, but it looks like we're going to put you above me, but it's really me above you. I'm going to tolerate you. I'm going to bring you on board. And I think it's important for people to realize that there is this difference. There's this genuine caring where we lift somebody else up and honor them for who they really are, or we amplify just the physical outward stuff and try to make it look like they're higher, but we're acting like we're actually higher for tolerating them. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah. And there is a fundamental difference between the two. And frankly, I would argue that the left does the latter. They say that, you know, I mean, they try to make it look like they're lifting people up, but really, I mean, who's doing the virtue signaling like 99% of the time on the left? It's white people who feel ashamed for being white.
Isn't it amazing to listen to the people on the left say that we can't have voter ID because it's oppressing Black voters?
Yeah.
And yet you go to, you've seen these interviews, maybe I have on YouTube, where they're interviewing Black people. Do you feel like it's oppressive to Blacks to require voter ID? And they're insulted.
Yeah. Like,
They're
you think
saying,
we can't go get an idea?
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah.
You're
You need an
telling me
ID
I'm
for anything.
Say again?
You need an ID for anything. Like,
Yes. And they're actually saying, you're telling me I'm too stupid to go get an ID?
right.
And so it's amazing to me. We could talk a lot about that. Oh gosh. All right. So let's go back to CPAC a little bit. What are some thoughts you had about CPAC?
Well, the other thing that I was really surprised by, I mean, and look, there was like the typical stuff that you would expect at CPAC, like talking about how unfair impeachment was and all that stuff. And, you know, I don't really want to get into that. That's kind of the typical stuff you would expect. But what really did surprise me was the bulk of the conversations that I sat in on, they were all about individual liberties and just freedom and making sure we have as much freedom as possible. And for me, you know, even though I still hold a lot of my liberal tendencies, and I refuse to give up the word liberal. I refuse to let these crazy off the cliff progressives co-opt my word. Okay. So I'm going to still say I'm a liberal. I'm not a leftist. I'm not crazy, but I do still have some of those tendencies.
Could I suggest that you're a classic liberal?
I think I mean, I think that that's true, but it's still like, I'm still like, I don't even like putting the modifier on there. I'm like, I've called myself a liberal for years and my values haven't changed. I feel like my party left me. I didn't leave my party. But I think one of the core values that I've always had is freedom of speech. freedom of speech is something that has always been really important to me. I mean, I thought when I was a teenager, I thought I was going to go to law school and go work for the ACLU to defend free speech, and now they don't even do that anymore. And the first thing I did when I bought my home was I threw a First Amendment magnet up on my fridge, and it's one of those things like this is like my ride or die issue. And I do not see the leftists are the people that are trying to suppress free speech now, and it's the conservatives that are like, I may not agree with everything that you say, but I will defend your right to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I have to choose between the two, I know exactly where I'm going.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing that if you step on, and that was kind of the crux of your initial article on Medium, was that you saw people not being allowed to leave the quote unquote the plantation, don't even step one toe off the plantation.
Right. Not even a toenail, right? Like not even the whole fucking toe. And it's like, and you know, we've seen this over and over and over again. And it's not even sometimes about something that you say in the knitting world, which is part of what I cover in my article, The Social Justice Crazy in the Knitting World. There have actually been times where people have been bullied and mobbed for not saying anything, for not speaking up and denouncing people.
Really?
Yeah, there was a very famous designer. She designs these beautiful sweaters that she just didn't talk about it, because what they were doing is the SJWs were going around just emailing people saying, are you aware that so-and-so did this and you have to denounce them, and if you don't denounce them, we're going to come after you publicly. And so this woman just refused to say anything. And then she ultimately blocked someone that was, and it happened to be a person of color, I think, that she blocked. So she committed 2 crimes. And so then they rallied and started mobbing her because she didn't say anything. And how dare you block this person from your place of privilege? And she ended up having to turn off all the comments on her post like forever. And she had to issue an apology, all this stuff. So it's not even enough just to like say the right thing anymore. If you choose not to say anything, they're still going to come after you.
Well, I love my my family's approach to all of this. Both my wife and I say, if that's what it comes to, you're going to feed us in prison.
Yeah. I will not give up on this one. I mean, it's like, and what I've seen in this experience is, yes, I've lost clients, but I've also gained some. And I think that there are more people that agree. The bet that I've made is that there are more people that agree with me than agree with them. And I think that's going to pan out. I really do.
So intellectual honesty is kind of like the main theme here.
I think so. And taking principled stances too. Actually having principles that you commit to, not only when they're convenient, but when they're inconvenient.
And that is kind of, when I say the word conservative, that's what I'm talking about, is having the principles that our founders held when they created the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So people say, oh, you're a conservative, you want to go back to the times of slavery and women not voting. I'm going, don't even go there. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
We're talking about conserving the principles upon which our founders stood when they wrote the Declaration, when they wrote the Constitution. That's what we're trying to conserve.
Mm-hmm.
So when I call myself a conservative, that's what I'm trying to conserve.
Yeah. And that's the other refreshing thing to me about CPAC and just being around more conservatives now in general, is that on the Democratic side, you know, it almost felt like you couldn't have any pride in America. Now, I love studying like Revolutionary War history. That's always been one of my big things. Boston is one of my favorite places in the world because, you know, you can go see all this stuff in person. And so I was always had a lot of pride in like what the founders did. And I loved learning about who they were and the perspectives they had, and understanding that they were not perfect men, but they were men of their time. And they did something that was like, has produced the greatest country in the world. And in the last several years on the Democratic side, it's like, if you're not tearing down everything about America and saying, I mean, what did Bernie Sanders say in one of the debates? America's a racist place from top to bottom. Like, no, it's not. And if you don't say, like, get on board with that and call Thanksgiving racist and, you know, the founders are horrible people, then you're excommunicated from the group. And it's been so refreshing to be around these people that take pride in where they live and take pride in what this experiment is.
So I've got a question for you. It has to do with your education.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in my doctoral classes,
mm-hmm.
and they're teaching us about critical race theory. and feminist critical theory. And I'm going, well, explain this. And they're going, well, we're looking at it from a perspective of, we examine everything through a perspective of a Black person,
Mm-hmm.
critical race theory, or everything through a feminist perspective, or that's how we're examining things. And this is a valid research method. Did you get any of that?
I got a little tiny bit of that in one of my very early doctoral classes, we had to review like the knapsack essay, the Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack essay, which is kind of one of the bases for a lot of this stuff now. But I honestly didn't get too much of it because I think I was pretty lucky. In a lot of my classes, I could really frame the content in any way that was most interesting to me. So I didn't generally go down that road. And I think I went through undergrad like a little too early for all that stuff. Not to say it wasn't there, but it was something that I could easily avoid if I didn't want to.
I have to tell you, I was blown away by it. I'm going, really? This is a valid form of study, is to criticize everything from a racist perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing that really bothers me is like they lean on lived experiences so much, but lived experiences are actually a valid research methodology, but they're completely doing it wrong. Like my doctoral dissertation was a qualitative dissertation. I had to literally go and collect the lived experiences of a number of people that dealt with workplace bullying. That's what I wrote my dissertation on. And I interviewed people, you collect their stories, but just understanding one person's story is not how you use lived experiences in a scholarly sense. What you'd have to do is collect a lot of stories, constantly be analyzing those stories for high-level themes that exist in all of them. And then once you kind of reach a saturation point of you're not discovering any new themes and you're seeing the same thing show up over and over again, then you're done. That is the scholarly way to use lived experiences, and that is not what they're doing.
No, it's not. And I agree with you, by the way. You always have to have that higher picture, that there's always a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And so that's how I look at this. But I totally agree with you that they're taking these perspectives and going, this is it. I'm going, no, this is a perspective. This isn't the bigger picture.
And then if you disagree with them, like they're like, you're denying my lived experience. I'm like,
and
you have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, you're denying how these things are supposed to be done.
So this is interesting because when you see politic polls, you see, well, here the high school people vote Republican and they're blue collar people, and then these college educated people they're voting Democrat. Mm-hmm. And they make it sound like the more educated you are, the smarter you are, and you're going to vote Democrat if you're smarter.
Yes.
But what's really happening, and you and I have been through this hoop, through this tunnel, is that it's more of an indoctrination.
Yeah.
This is why they vote Democrats, because the instructors, and it goes back to the emotional imprints, right? You want that approval. You want your instructor to give you a good grade. So you try to understand what they're teaching and you parrot all that stuff. And especially if you're a young brain full of mush, you absorb that. And so you end up with the college educated, and it sounds on the surface like they're smarter, but I look at it and say, maybe they're just more indoctrinated.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, someone actually pointed out to me on Twitter yesterday, and I never actually thought about this before, but they're calling people who haven't been through college uneducated instead of like blue collar workers. That is like the most demeaning thing in the world. I mean, anyone who's ever been to college, I have gone through 27 years of schooling. I've had 27 years of schooling, and I would never call a person who has not had the same level of schooling that I have uneducated. Everyone is educated. Most people go through, like almost everyone goes through high school nowadays. That's education. When you go into the working world and you learn on the job, that's education. And it just boggles my mind that anyone who has ever been through college, and that most people, when they graduate from college, don't use anything from the degree that they spent 4 years studying.
No.
And then they hold it up as the end all be all of their experience. It just makes no sense.
No. And as my line of education, my undergrad, my master's, my PhD are all in how people learn. Yeah. So it's all education and how to create training. And you have this learning paradigm, right? And so my wife's grandmother is still alive. She's in her late 80s. And she is, as my wife says, one of the smartest people she knows. She got married in her mid-teens, never finished high school. And she is so intelligent. She reads all the time.
Yeah.
she always thinks of herself as uneducated, but she's one of the most educated people you'll ever meet.
Right, right. You do not have to go to school to be educated. I mean, I joke all the time. I call my MBA my superfluous piece of paper because I never use it at all. And even my PhD, I tell people, like, I didn't need to do my PhD to do what I'm doing today. I don't know if I would be if I hadn't, because it gave me that confidence to go and do it. And it gave me a fancy title that I can use that people think gives me credibility. But did I need to do that to do what I'm doing? Absolutely not.
No, it is kind of funny how people assign such credibility to letters. And what's as a off topic here a little bit, but it's amazing to me how all you have to do is get a PhD in something, never have to learn how to teach, and yet you become a college professor with a PhD when you've had zero training on how to transfer knowledge, skills, and attitudes to somebody else.
Have you heard, maybe a little off topic, but have you heard about what UC Berkeley's doing?
Tell me.
Oh, check this out. Okay, so UC Berkeley has, like, they get thousands and thousands and thousands of applications to be for teachers, right? And for professors. And what they're doing is a first swipe at those applications. They are basing the entire thing on, have you implemented a diversity program at a school before? Or, like, have you implemented some sort of diversity program or planned some sort of diversity conference? And if you don't have, as a teacher, the credentials to say that you have created a diversity conference or done something big with that, they automatically eliminate you from the pool of prospective teachers at Berkeley. And so they use that to weed people out. Now, this is actually illegal. This is not legal to do, because when you're hiring people, and this is for true of any position, you have to make decisions based on the core functions of the job. And so what Berkeley is saying is that we don't care about how excellent you are at teaching. We don't care about your research. We don't care about your background in the subject matter that we're actually hiring you to teach. We only care about how involved you are with these diversity initiatives on campus. How crazy is that? They're going to get sued.
On a scale of 1 to 10, that's 10 crazy.
Yeah, they're going to get sued, 100%. And it seems as though, like, the whole UC system might actually be doing this as well, but they've caught them at Berkeley.
Well, that leads to a kind of an interesting question, because you have a lot of stuff happening that's quote unquote illegal, such as that. Yeah. You've got a lot of people in politics doing illegal things, AKA Spygate. Yeah. And we don't see a lot of court action.
No.
We have a two-tiered justice system. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
And it's very frustrating. In fact, I keep thinking, if I get pulled over for something, I'm just going to say, well, did you guys convict so-and-so for doing this? No. Okay, well, then why are you harassing me? We have this total two-tier system. It drives me up a wall.
It's absolutely crazy. And it's funny. I mean, even separate from the legal system, like I understood that conservatives were, discriminated against online, and they were treated differently online. I always understood that from a theoretical perspective. I gotta tell you though, after my article went viral, I'd never received a violation on any social media platform in my life. Never. Until the day after my article went viral. And then I got not one, but 2 Instagram violations. You want to know what I did?
First of all, let me just say, you've got to be kidding me, but now tell me what you did.
No. I posted a comment to a woman that was getting bullied and mobbed by the SJW crazies, and I called her beautiful, brilliant, talented, and empowered. Instagram violation. And then I was so annoyed that got me an Instagram violation that I took a screenshot of it and I posted it on my Instagram saying, Instagram is being stupid because all I did was give this woman a compliment. Instagram violation for that one too. I swear to God.
Oh my gosh.
Like, all right.
I can't believe it. Okay, so on my last podcast, I talked about this guy who is a Bernie bro. And he's Carlos Maza.
Oh God, that guy.
So so tell me a little bit about Maza.
So I don't know like terribly much about him, but I know what you're talking about. So he's like Maza is like a communist. He's like a legit communist. And so this guy at the New York Post, he basically got in trouble on Twitter for tweeting out photos of Carlos Maza's family's $11 million home, because apparently this guy who is just known as like an absolute communist, calls people comrade, all this stuff, like big Bernie bro. His family is very wealthy, and his mother, I guess, is married to a guy who founded a software company, and they sold it for like $11 billion or some ridiculous amount. And so, like,
yeah, they're
this
not
guy,
married. They're fiancés. They've never been
Oh.
married.
Well, what have you? So, but basically, this journalist from the New York Post tweeted out pictures of this home, and he got an Instagram violation, or not Instagram, Twitter violation. Like, he got suspended from Twitter until he removed the photos. But you know what's ironic about that? Carlos Maza tweeted out pictures of James Carville's home to say that this guy is like a grifter and he's dressing in normal clothes to make us think he's normal, but he lives in this big mansion. Of course, he didn't get in trouble for that.
No, and that was what I talked about in the podcast.
Yeah.
But the cool line from Maza that I thought was so ironic was when Maza says, "Can we stop?" He says, "Dear God, can we stop taking advice from the wealthy?" Not going, wait a minute.
Yeah, Carlos. Okay.
You were raised in extreme wealth, and we're going to take advice from you.
Yeah.
But here he gets the guy from John Levine. Is it Levine? Levine?
I think it's something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so he gets suspended from Twitter
Mm-hmm.
for posting publicly available information.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff he got blocked from, and James O'Keefe got blocked too when he published publicly available. And they say you're publishing private data. No, he's not.
No.
Anybody can go online and find that information.
Yeah. Yeah.
The media giants have gotten crazy.
Oh, well, and even when I was, right after my article went viral, I got a ton of hate mail. I can't even tell you like how much hate mail I got on every single platform, and on Instagram in particular. So what was happening on Instagram was people would post things in their Instagram stories telling their followers to like come after me. And so I had all this stuff documented. I was reporting everything to Instagram. And I actually had posted some of the more like obscene things that I got, like people sending me just like horrific things, reported everything to Instagram. Did Instagram do anything? No.
Nothing.
But they gave me a violation for calling a woman brilliant, talented, and empowered. Yay, Instagram.
Boy, that's a whole podcast discussion point right there.
Mm-hmm.
Just on how the media, the social media platforms lean so far left. What I found interesting was that Twitter made the decision to not take any political advertising this year.
Yeah, but I mean, they're still. Like, have you heard about Mikey Harlow's story?
I'm sorry, I don't even know who that is.
Oh, you got to look up Mikey Harlow. So he is he's kind of in the walkaway movement. He's done a bunch of their town halls, and he got banned. He got a permanent ban on Twitter 6 months ago for something that was just completely made up. And they gave him all these different reasons for his permanent ban. He kept fighting it and going back, and they kept giving him different reasons for why he had been permanently banned on Twitter. And it was just obviously just fabricated. And so he just kept fighting it though, and he kept going, and he just got his Twitter account restored because someone at Twitter admitted that they were going after people that were in the LGBT community who were Republicans. They admitted that they were falsely banning these people. And so he got Twitter to restore his account.
And where is the accountability for this?
There is none.
That's exactly the point. There's no accountability. They're not oh gosh.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that there would be someone come up with a platform, and I know people have tried. There's Parler and all sorts of other places that have tried to become more accepting, but they never seem to gain traction. It's very frustrating.
Oh, I agree. But it's hard. I mean, I've been trying to use Parler lately. I mean, Gab is a thing. I mean, but people have to move there in order for these things to be effective. addictive. They have to stop using Twitter. And like, am I going to stop using Twitter? No, because Twitter's just become fun for me after all this stuff. And so while I would be fully supportive if the community wanted to move over to another platform, I'd be happy to go with them. It's just really difficult.
By the way, I want to compliment you on your tweets. I've been watching your tweeting, and you have gone from minor league to major league in lightning speed. You are hitting, people throw hard fastballs at you, curveballs at you, major league speed, and you're just hitting them out of the park. So hats off to you for your tweeting.
Thank you.
And
it's fun. It's like a game.
It's at Dr. Karlyn B.
Yep.
So if people want to follow you, they can go to at Dr. Karlyn. That's KARLYNB. Dr. Karlyn B. And that you definitely want to follow her on Twitter because she does great tweets. It's kind of fun to watch.
I'm mostly snarky, but you know, the comments, oh my gosh, the comments on some of these things, I just sit back because this is like, you know, the day after like Super Tuesday Part 2. And all I did this morning was post like, you know, like something about, isn't it cute that Democrats thought that all of Bernie's supporters would just fall in line behind Joe Biden? And like, I just dropped that little bomb and the comments are going off and it's hilarious. Like the Democrats are just eating themselves and I'm just sitting back and enjoying every second of it.
So here's a question. You've got 29,000, almost 30,000 Twitter followers.
Yeah.
How many of those were following you prior to your quote unquote conversion?
About 6,000.
So you've gained 23,000 followers since your conversion.
Yeah, in the last month or so.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's also different because the followers I had before, I mean, that was spanning the course of I've been on Twitter since the beginning of Twitter. And so a lot of the followers I had, they weren't really engaged anymore. A lot of them, I think, are just ghost accounts that haven't really been used. The followers now, though, like they're super engaged. They're ready to go. And so it's created a very different experience on Twitter. And it's really fun to kind of play with.
But you're having some, shall we say, challenging conversations. People are challenging you, is what I mean. And you're doing what I love to see is the snark, because I kind of engage in it myself. Yeah. But the question I have is, what percentage do you think are following you? Just ballpark guess. But what percentage do you think are following you just to give you grief?
I don't think too many. I think the people that are giving me grief are far outweighed by the people who agree with me. Certainly there's some people who give me grief, but I'll tell you what, like I have had to learn the features of Twitter. I am liberally muting people that continue to give me grief so I don't have to see it. And I don't like to block people, but if people are coming at me and attacking me, and the latest thing that's happening, and this is actually happening on the Republican side, and I don't like it, is more people than you would expect are saying things to me to the effect of, well, you shouldn't be surprised when your husband cheats on you and leaves you because of that haircut that you have. And I'm like, really? Block. Like, I will not suffer that nonsense at all. And so, I mean, I'm getting a little bit of grief, but not really that much.
That is actually one of my standards. When someone gets personal and it makes a personal attack, sorry, block.
Yeah, it's just not worth it. Not worth it.
No, and I really get turned off by that kind of conversation on both sides of the aisle, and it happens on both sides of the aisle. And sadly, I see it more on the political right, where people are mocking looks. Yeah. And I go, you have zero control over that. You got makeup and hairstyles and whatnot you can choose, but that's a choice. And if my wife and I had the conversation when my daughter hit her teens, and my daughter's thinking about dyeing her hair blue. It's like my wife says, let her. So what? I'd rather have her dye her hair blue than go out and do X, Y, or Z because the hair is going to grow out.
Oh yeah. And I have this thing, like I don't dye my hair anymore, but like there's hairspray that you can use in your hair that turns it a color. I love doing that stuff. And people are like, you look like a leftist. You look like a social justice warrior. I'm like, it's a haircut. Like, relax, get over it.
Yeah, we could go on about that because I whenever people talk about looks, I start losing respect for them. And you'll never hear me talking about somebody's looks. Yeah. They are what they are. What are their values? That's more important.
It's far more important, far more interesting.
And more valuable. Let's talk. I know you got to get going here. Let's talk, and gosh, we could talk about stuff for hours. I need to have you back.
All right.
But so you got a column now on UncoverDC. This is your first column for UncoverDC. Welcome to the club.
Yay.
Because I've been writing for them since I think October 1st was my first column for UncoverDC. And so welcome to UncoverDC. But the title of your column is Dear Democrats, it's time to accept that you're getting 4 more years of Trump.
Yep. Just stepping right in it right there, aren't I? And the column it's really about, it's like an open letter to Democrats, just saying, you know, I've been in your shoes before. And here's the thought process that I went down when I started to realize that Donald Trump was probably going to win. Because Democrats, they're not thinking about this strategically, and they're so like, not everyone, but I'm making a broad generalization. They're so trapped in their bubble, and they're not talking to real people, and they're not looking at polling. And, you know, it's just like, I wanted to like lay out the thought process, and not necessarily to convince people to vote for Donald Trump. That is not what I'm trying to do at all. But I think that the left was very caught off guard in 2016. We did not see this coming. Like, you know, we did not see it coming at all that Trump was going to win. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But the backlash since that shock has just like, this is why politics is so divisive. I'm not going to say it started with the election of Donald Trump, but it certainly sped things up and escalated the divisiveness. And so I am actually, as funny as like we can make this article, like I am actually genuinely scared of what's going to happen when Trump wins again in 2020, because it is so obvious to me that the Democrats have learned absolutely nothing in the past 4 years. They're doing literally exactly the same thing they did before. And so are we going to wake up on, what is it, like November 4th and go through the same level of shock and terror that Donald Trump is in the presidency again? And I think it's even more important now, though, because the left has seemed to embrace this by all means necessary attitude, where they're okay with the violence of Antifa. They're okay with doing anything that they need to do to deplatform people. Like, what's going to happen when it happens again? And so my article is just like, I'm really just trying to get people to start to wrap their heads around the idea that this is possible, so that maybe the shock and awe won't happen again.
Can I know this is supposed to be about you. I try to keep my interviews focusing on my guests, but can I share my perspective on this?
Sure.
You have I think, a very deep swamp, a very corrupt swamp in Washington, D.C. Nobody on the right nor the left, the establishment, wanted Donald Trump in the White House. When you have Republicans, past Republican presidents saying they're not going to vote for him, that's telling. Because Ronald Reagan's thing is, you know, thou shalt never speak bad about a fellow Republican kind of thing. So I think the man was brought in. People know that there's corruption in Washington, D.C. I think it's on both sides of the aisle, deeply on both sides of the aisle. And I think predominantly, though, on the left, I think they're more flagrant about it. And I think maybe more brazen in the stuff that they do. And I've written extensively on this. People can go back and see my columns on UncoverDC, where I've written about Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi's ties to corruption. And I've done some research on that. I think they're terrified that Donald Trump is going to expose them, that all their financial graft is going to come back and bite them. That's what they're afraid of. I think that's the big fear. Now, they're never going to say that, obviously, but they will make up every conceivable accusation they can to deflect and detract and try to keep Donald Trump from uncovering their crimes. I think that's the underlying motive behind all of this on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. And I think that, you know, from my perspective, I don't even think that this is about, at least for me, fighting that battle at the moment, because there are a lot of people fighting that one. I just don't want to see these divisions continue to grow between across the country. I just don't think it's good for us. And this is what I said in my first article about the Trump rally. We need to start making some choices. We are either going to start to choose to take steps towards one another and try to find those areas of common ground, or we're going to continue to take steps away from one another. And what is going to happen if we keep moving away from one another? It just makes no logical sense. At the end of the day, we still live in this country. We are all part of the same country. If you don't like it, if you don't want to be a part of it, hey, you've got a whole world of options available to you. But if you're going to be here, don't be doing things that are going to cause another civil war in the process. Because I really think if this keeps escalating, that's exactly where it's going.
And it's going to be even scarier than the first Civil War.
Yeah.
Because it's not geographic.
Right.
It's
exactly.
ideological.
Yeah.
And so you have, instead of the North versus the South, you've got different ideologies all in the same neighborhood. So it's a much different kind of war.
Yeah, and it's not going to be sustainable. And so we are the only ones, the politicians are not going to save us from this one. There's nothing that they can do to bridge this divide. They're going to continue fighting and bickering and going back and forth, and Trump's going to do whatever he's going to do. But at the end of the day, normal, average, everyday people have got to start saying, I've had enough of the fighting. I'm tired of it. We don't need to agree on everything, but we do need to learn how to be civil with one another again.
Mm-hmm. Conflict Resolution 101.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll do a little self-promotion plug. People can go to YouTube and look up my name, Borysenko, and conflict resolution. And I've got a 15-minute video on there that talks about how to do conflict resolution. Mm-hmm. And it works in the family, it works in the workplace. And you know what? As I'm sitting here thinking about it, it would work great in politics as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and watch that video when we get done. But I mean, is one of the steps of that video that you have to want to solve the conflict rather than perpetuate it?
You have to want to understand the other person's point of view and be thinking win-win.
Yeah.
So so in a way, yes, it's where do you want to go? Where do I want to go? And I want you to win and I want to win. So how do we get there?
Yeah.
And as long as you maintain that thinking, you can get there.
Exactly. And you know what another word for win-win is?
Tell me.
Compromise. Finding a compromise. And I actually have a whole talk on YouTube called Playing Politics, the Psychology of the Human Workplace, where I go through my 5 principles of how to play politics well and use all of office politics to do good instead of evil. And one of my key principles is all about looking for that compromise. And what I say is that it is better every single day of the week to get maybe 70 or 50 or even 60% of what you want, get a little bit of what you want, and to give someone else a win, than it is to get 100% of what you want and to piss someone else off. And because that will always come back to bite you. So we always have to be looking for those ways to compromise.
And to me, that always relies on the mindset of thinking win-win. And I can borrow that from Stephen Covey. But as soon as we lose the win-win mindset, then we lose the ability to succeed.
Yeah.
And as long as one of the two people having the conflict holds on to the win-win thinking, then it's possible. As soon as both parties reject the win-win paradigm, the win-win thinking, then your chances of getting it pretty much disappear.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, well, all right. I need to let you go. You need to be working on prepping for your live. You're going to be going live. So people who are watching this particular podcast will be watching it after your live show today. Today is the 11th of March. Looking at my clocker. So they'll be seeing this afterwards. But you're doing this live show every week now?
Yeah, I'm trying to get into, I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be, but I really am trying to get into a cadence of doing live shows on YouTube. I also do post content on YouTube that is not live, that is like pre-taped throughout the week. But if you follow me on Twitter, you're going to get notifications of when I go live. And, you know, my schedule is a little bit hectic. I travel a lot. I can't always do it on the same day every week, but I am going to be trying to get into a more regular cadence with it.
Yeah, I totally get that because I'm trying to do 2 podcasts a week. And with my work schedule, it's
you get them when you get them.
Exactly. Which is why, so do you have a YouTube, people can subscribe to you on YouTube?
They can, if they go to youtube.com/Dr. Karlyn Borysenko. YouTube made me pick out a really long username. I'm kind of annoyed by it. Or they could just, Google me. You can, like, if you Google my name, it's going to come right up. I guarantee I'm like the only Karlyn Borysenko you're ever going to meet.
Yes. So, and I tell people that with my podcasts as well, is if you click the red subscribe button and then a little bell shows up, And people
Yep.
think, well, if you just click the bell, that you're going to get notified. Well, not necessarily. If you click then the word all,
Mhm.
that's when you're going to get notified that you've uploaded a new video.
Yeah, you gotta do both, and then check in every once in a while because YouTube likes to unsubscribe people for mysterious unknown reasons.
Can't imagine why they would do that.
I can't imagine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's so much more that we need to talk about and that we can talk about. But I want to thank you for being on the show. Again, people can get a hold of you by tell us how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dr. Karlyn B, or you can get a hold of me at zenworkplace.com.
And then, of course, your YouTube channel.
Oh, and my YouTube channel. Yep.
And you've got a book.
I do have a book. It's called Zen Your Work, and it's all about it's for people who want to create more positive, empowering work experiences. And it walks you through different mindfulness exercises that you can use to reduce your stress, learn more about your own work style, build your confidence, build better working relationships, all that good stuff.
Excellent. And that's available on Amazon?
It's available. Yeah, Amazon is, you can get the paperback, the digital audiobook, and it's available in other places too, but Amazon, as we know, is always the easiest.
Easiest, yeah. Unfortunately, that's where I do a lot of my book shopping,
Yep.
but it is the easiest. So, okay, well, I just want to say thank you for being a guest on the show, and let's have you back.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime, Daniel. You let me know.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Bye now. There you have it. As you may have known, Karlyn and I have a similar passion for helping people. And off camera, we talked about putting together a forum to discuss our coaching philosophies and tips that people can use for improving their productivity and effectiveness. The date for that is yet to be decided. But if you want to find out when that's going to be, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, to subscribe to the show. If you're watching it on YouTube, just click the red subscribe button and then click on the bell and then click the word all, and then you'll get notified when we upload new videos. The price for that forum is going to be be online, be free. So you'll definitely want to catch that. If you want to track my political writings and stuff, you can go to UncoverDC.com. If you're following on Twitter, it's at New Book of Daniel. Facebook is simply facebook.com/New Book of Daniel. Of course, you can always leave notes down below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can send an email to newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. So I want to thank you so much for watching the show today. My name is Daniel Bobinsky. You've been listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast, and we'll catch you on the next show.